I apologize for our backs. Welcome to this town hall, and we will have a chance after you hear from the panelists to have questions from the audience, so start thinking now. But this is rightly titled Fighting the Global Pushback. And I think it's pretty clear to all of us who follow issues having to do with human rights and women's rights and gay rights and all kinds of questions of dignity and identity that the global pushback is real and it has deep implications for not only individual nations but also how we organize ourselves internationally, what our priorities are. And it's especially important to focus on it now so that we can have some kind of joint and mutual support. We have a great panel, and I want to start with someone who really is an expert in this area to give us an overview from his position. He has literally spent 2 decades on the front lines fighting for fundamental rights. Neil Datta is the founder and executive director of the European Parliamentary Forum on Sexual and Reproductive Rights. He created the organization in 2004 with a small group of like-minded parliamentarians who saw the need for a permanent, coordinated effort to defend these rights. Now, under his leadership, the forum has grown into a network of 30 all-party parliamentary groups. They have worked to strengthen laws, improve access to reproductive health care, mobilize resources for programs not only in Europe but across the globe. So please, Neil, give us your perspective about the rise of anti-gender, anti-rights movements, and talk a little bit about some of the reports that you've issued, because if we want to know what's coming, we need to read what you are telling us is next around the corner.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me first start by situating the context of this backlash, this pushback within the Munich theme. Now, the theme for this conference is under destruction, okay? Which we understand why. I think the next thing that we need to consider is what is being created in the wake of that destruction. I mean, it was Pablo Picasso who said, every act of creation is first an act of destruction. And I think if we take a look at what's being created, we'll find that gender sits at the center of it, whether we realize it or not. Now, when we take a look at what role does gender play, we can see that it is, on the one hand, both a target of some idealized vision of what the new society would be, but it is also a tool to get there. Now, in terms of as a target or an ideal, we can see the trad wives and what it is that they would like, the new place of women and sexual minorities within there. Something maybe we underestimate is the place of men as well, a hyper-masculinized, militarized offer that is being presented. When we take a look at how it is being used as a tool, we see that the notions of gender are being used to polarize societies, radicalize young people, including young men, and also to, as an entry point to reach certain political or economic objectives. Now, when we take it all together, we see that it is basically a weaponization of the social conservatism that exists in every society to meet political, economic, or even geopolitical objectives. Now, we did a report, we launched a report last June where we took a look at the financing behind this anti-gender movement, specifically focused on Europe. What we found was the economic evolution of this movement, whereas in 2009 we could calculate about $20 million circulating within this movement in Europe annually. By 2023 it had reached 250 million. So something that increases by greater than a factor of 10 will have more impact. Now, what is happening within this movement, we can see that it's operating in 5 different, what we call dimensions simultaneously. In the religious dimension, it's always been there. In the civil society dimension as well. But also, I would say the epicenter of this is the political dimension. And what used to be the Christian Democrats, the soft conservatives in many different countries, now it has been the far-right populists who have picked up this anti-gender activism in order to gain access to power. Related to this is the think tanks, the knowledge production capacity, where we see a whole ecosystem of think tanks really digging into this issue and offering policy initiatives to the politicians to then roll back rights in terms of gender and human rights, and then the politicians are eagerly running with this. And then finally, we see also a geopolitical dimension, where different states or actors close to state power are using different aspects of gender in an effort to reorganize geopolitics. So 2 examples, really. One is the Russian Federation promoting 2 things. One is for countries to exit the Istanbul Convention on Gender-Based Violence. Now, they're not concerned about violence against women. The idea is to get countries to exit an international human rights framework, creating tensions with this international organization or the West, and then bringing it closer to a Russian orbit. Same thing with the promotion of anti-LGBT laws, anti-LGBT propaganda, things like that. That's one example from the Russian Federation. And I'll conclude with the final example coming from your country, Madam Secretary, what has come out in the National Security Strategy document released last December, which talks about civilizational erasure and supporting patriotic forces in Europe. Okay, civilizational erasure, we need to understand where that comes from. The point of origin is gender ideology. Okay, gender ideology is an artificial construct to describe bad things in society like divorce and contraception and abortion. Gender ideology leads to selfish women not having babies and the promotion of LGBT. This then leads to demographic decline, which leads to the demographic winter. Cities emptied of their European inhabitants, unable to take care of themselves, which then leads to the Great Replacement, a conspiracy theory led by Soros, the UN, perhaps the Clintons, which would then import non-whites, non-Europeans, non-Christians into European cities, which then leads to the civilizational erasure of Europe. So that's how we're seeing gender play out at multiple levels of society. So thank you.
I'm really grateful for your overview, Neil, because I think a lot of people don't understand that this was not some spontaneous outgrowth of an outcry from folks in their homes and offices and communities saying, let's do this. This was a carefully planned, plotted strategy to use gender issues as political wedges. And I also appreciate your pointing to the role of Putin, because we saw that happening about 15 years ago when they began their crackdown on LGBTQ activities, marches, all kinds of elements of everyday life that they began to suppress, and also began changing laws that protected women, most notably the laws against domestic violence. So this is a well-funded, well-structured campaign that is then weaponized for political purposes, primarily on the far-right populist front. I want to turn to someone who's been involved in this work for a long time in trying to explain and truly bring people together around issues of gender, and that's Sarah McBride, U.S. Congresswoman from the state of Delaware. You know, as a gender rights champion, and also the first openly transgender member of the United States Congress, you've been on the front lines of this fight, and you've also been on the receiving end of so many threats and attacks that come from, again, in many ways, organized efforts. So when you hear Neil talking about it from a European perspective, although he did bring us in at the end there, Sarah, how do you see it from the United States? And I want to underscore how truly effective Sarah has been in talking with her colleagues, first in the legislature, the state legislature in Delaware, now in Congress, and you have shown immense grace in the face of attacks, even from your fellow members of Congress.
Well, thank you so much for those incredibly kind words. It's an honor to be here with you, Secretary Clinton. It's an honor to be here with another trailblazer, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. And of course, it's an honor to be here with my fellow panelists. And the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, as well. Once politicians start naming other politicians in a room, it never stops. There is no question in the United States that after decades of historic progress on gender equality writ large, and specifically more recently on LGBTQ rights, that we are facing, as you mentioned, a well-organized, well-funded, right-wing regressive movement. And they really have placed trans people at the center of that effort, but we should be clear that the consequences of this anti-trans effort, not only out of proximity, but out of intentionality, will include consequences for women of all backgrounds. Because at the end of the day, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, and sexism are all rooted in the same prejudice. The belief that one perception at birth should dictate who you are, how you act, what you do, who you love, and how you dress. And it's why threats toward trans people are threats toward all women. Because when they use trans people as the tip of the spear, when they come after trans people, as they are doing right now, using us as a political wedge issue, using people like me, using me, as you mentioned, as a political pawn, not only are they licensing discrimination against trans people, they're sanctioning gender policing that we know in reality actually disproportionately targets non-transgender women. There was an example in the House of Representatives last year after I was banned from restrooms when a colleague of mine, a freshman Democrat with shoulder-length hair and glasses, used the women's restroom just off the floor of the House of Representatives, and a Republican Congresswoman saw this freshman Democrat with shoulder-length hair and glasses in the bathroom and started to harass her, yelled at her, "You don't belong here." And when the freshman Democrat was bemused and bewildered by this harassment in the restroom, the Congresswoman went to get reinforcements from the floor of the House, brought other colleagues back to the women's restroom to yell at this colleague. And eventually they walked out realizing that they had thought this freshman colleague was me. She was not. First of all, they're so bad at gender policing that they can't police the one bathroom off the floor of the House of Representatives with one single trans person in Congress. But these are deeply unserious efforts that have very serious consequences. Because if you don't walk woman enough, if you don't talk woman enough, if you don't act woman enough, hell, if you have shoulder-length hair and glasses, they tell you that you don't belong. And this is an effort to diminish the right of bodily autonomy. If they can undermine that right for trans people, they can undermine it for everyone. And I think we have to understand right now that gender equality is a barometer of democratic stability. And a strong man's greatest asset is scarcity. When there is scarcity in jobs, when there is scarcity of opportunity, they pick boogeymen, or in this case, boogie people, and they blame them. They blame the immigrant. They blame the trans person. But now increasingly what we're seeing is they're not just blaming the immigrant or the trans woman, they're blaming all women. They're saying, you, young man, can't get this job because this unqualified trans person or this unqualified woman has gotten this job. And if we are to address these issues of gender equality, we have to address the underlying reality of that scarcity. We have to make it clear that this is not a zero-sum game. We have to guarantee that there's opportunity for everyone. But it starts with that tip of the spear. It starts with trans people. Because if they can do it there, they will be able to do it anywhere.
Well, I appreciate how you expanded the aperture, Sarah, because I agree that this is about any evidence of nonconformity. This is about, as you say, scarcity. This is about not falling in line. This is about questioning the patriarchy, all of that. And it's something that I think our next panelist has been on the forefront of addressing. And Benaifer, you have been, as the president of the Open Society Foundation, really on the front lines on human rights and the rest. But the thing that I want to focus you on for a minute that others may not know is you helped secure the first ever convictions for rape as a weapon of war after the Rwanda genocide. And now that you're leading Open Society, which I think is certainly one of, if not the world's largest human rights funder, operating in more than 120 countries, I want you to reflect back about what you went through to get those convictions and whether you think this change in attitude, this not just pushback, but pullback from protecting women's rights, would have undermined your work today to try to shine that bright light on the attacks on women. And why do you think women's rights are so often the first target in a broader attack on rights?
So the first conviction that you spoke about at the Rwanda Tribunal came about based on, I was a researcher for a group called Human Rights Watch at the time, and I documented very severe sexual violence against women during the Rwandan genocide, as you well know. Then when the Rwanda Tribunal was set up, we assumed, just like in Yugoslavia, there would be investigations and ultimately convictions. What we found was that investigators and prosecutors were just not taking this seriously. So for them, it was a sad thing, an unfortunate thing, but not a war crime, not a genocide crime, not warranted as something serious enough to be taken attention of. And it took a lot of not just lobbying, but continuing to push the tribunal for quite a while. And eventually, the first conviction that you spoke about only came about because of efforts from an amicus brief filed by women's rights activists and a feminist judge on the bench who made an effort to make the prosecution go back and reopen the investigation. And so what it signals is the importance of having champions in the right place to continue to raise this issue, because there's a lot of assumptions about women's place in the world, women's place and what happens to women, etc. And so if I may just transition that into today's effort, I think that it's not a given that we will continue to get convictions for sexual violence. I don't think that when you've secured one, that you're guaranteed of the next win. I think it's going to require vigilance to keep on doing it. And let me just say, I think the anti-gender and the anti-rights effort, I think in some ways we should acknowledge that it's because of gains. I actually think it's not because human rights has failed. It's in fact that human rights has made progress, that for women, for gender expansive debates, for LGBT, for minorities, it has opened over the last 60, 70 years opportunities and resources and a chance for women to get onto the table. And so what we're seeing, this progress has created a backlash. And this backlash is now what we have to address. Within the backlash, what we're seeing, and I think it's manifested in so many ways right now, is an abandonment of our shared humanity. And that is fundamentally the pinning of what human rights is, which is that you and I ultimately share as human beings a shared humanity, and that lifting one lifts all. That, I think, we need to fight for again. We're seeing the erosion of that. And why? Why is it that we're seeing it? I think first, there's a realization that power is shifting, and that's very threatening. Power is shifting, again, a sign of success, that there's going to be more equality of that. And the second thing is that voice is growing. These communities, all of us who speak on behalf of universal human rights, our voice is louder, our voice is stronger. And I just want to name 6 quick things and then I'll stop. Why is it that the backlash is having success? Why is it, and how is it coming? First is, I think that we have to realize in pretty much every culture, the role of a woman traditionally has been as a wife and a mother. And as women seek other opportunities to do other things with their lives, including to be wives and mothers, this is stepping out of what is expected. And you see that backlash from culture. And culture is something very strong. As they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture is a huge driver for pushing women back into the spaces they are supposed to be in. The second thing is, I think most faiths, all faiths as far as I can see in terms of religion, again, place women in a certain role. And faith and faith-based organizations oftentimes, again, are pushing women into spaces that they feel are traditionally how they should behave, what they should do. So again, I think that's another space we need to look at, because many people are driven through faith and are actually motivated to faith to do lots of good things. But on the issue of gender, we have to look at it carefully. There are structural obstacles for women to enter spaces. The patriarchal system is actually got very, that makes women have to jump higher, work harder, do more to do the same. And I think that as ceilings get broken, anybody who's been a first woman in any aspect will know that that job comes with a rougher road, a few more dings. You're not just speaking for the job in terms of your performance. You are actually representing your whole community, and you are breaking a ceiling for the next. And that is a responsibility it comes with. Reproductive health is such an important space for this battle. Why? Because fertility is an important role for women in traditional societies and traditionally how they're seen. And that is a way to, again, close women's options by requiring. So these attacks on women who choose not to have children, who choose to take on alternate roles, it's again very threatening. And so removing access to abortion, calling women who choose not to have children catless ladies, and etc. It's very, very targeted in terms of pushing women back into roles. Here's an interesting fact. In history now, this is the first time more women are graduating from university than men. That is going to have huge consequences in the next decade of where women are going to appear, and they're going to be qualified, and they're going to be able to take positions that previously there weren't the numbers to. That's also, again, a threat because voice and power is shifting. So lastly, connected to this anti-gender movement is the rise of authoritarianism. And why? Authoritarianism embraces this masculinity, this idea that people have roles, and basically this kind of idea of hard masculinity, anything that is soft or womanly, etc. And so authoritarianism and anti-gender, they go hand in hand. Because those agendas fit in very well. So I'll stop there, but that gives you a sense both of the successes, but also why the backlash is so strong.
That's a great summary that I think helps to really position a lot of what we see happening, those six points. Let me turn now to Dr. Dennis Mukwege, who is a longtime friend and hero of mine, who has been on the front lines as the president and founder of the Panzi Hospital and Foundation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where for many years he was literally taking care of women who had been assaulted and caring for them, again, of all ages. And so, you know, I think, Dennis, it's fair to say that you have been working to not just save the lives and the health of women, but to lift up women, to demonstrate the importance of viewing women as equal human beings, not to be attacked and discarded in the forest and left to die, but to be, you know, viewed as worthy of the support, the care, the agency that they deserve. Could you talk a little bit about not only your work, but any thoughts you would want to share with us about what you've seen over these years and what lessons you think we can draw from it?
Thank you, Secretary of the State. I'm now working for 25 years, fighting against sexual violence in my country. And I can say that women's rights is sitting on the intersection of individual and bodily autonomy. It's also sitting on the structure of family, religious authority, and also economic independence and political participation. And when we can see this position of women, maybe we can more understand why in conflict women are targeted, not only because they are women or targeted because they want to get sexual on them. It's not a question of sexual. It's really to target them because they know that to destroy women in community is to destroy the entire community. And my experience now for more than 25 years, I can see that when women are targeted in a community, it's really a weapon of war. It's a weapon that you can see is not destroying only women, but is destroying communities, is destroying even the country. It's a way just to make a war, I can say, without paying the cost, because to use young people, to train them to destroy women in a community, it's really very cheap weapon to use it. And the consequence on the community is not only the immediate consequence, we have the long-term consequence, but now we can see intergenerational consequence on the use of rape as a weapon of war in many countries. So when it comes to the Republic Democratic of Congo, where I'm working, I can see that now we have the big number. I think it's more than 7 million of people who are internally displaced. And when you talk with them, you can understand that women are afraid to be raped. And the use of rape is really a psychological weapon because it's to touch on your own dignity. And the women, not only women, but also their daughters and the whole family. So the massive displacement of the population is following with the place where rape is happening. This is the first consequence. And when the population is internally displaced or refugee, their life is it becomes completely different before the rape and after the rape. The second thing is to downsizing the demography. And we can see that when women are raped, they are targeting their genital in shooting, in putting products in the genital. All these things have nothing to do with sexuality. It's just to destroy their capacity of fertility. And we can see that with sexual transmitted disease, with AIDS, you can diminish the demography of the population in just using rape. The second thing is when women are raped in front of their children, the husband, the community, most of the time they have a kind of guilty that they should not get, and they are ashamed for what happened to them. And the relation in the society is completely changed because the mother is feeling that I'm not at all a mother. When it happened to me in front of my children, in front of the family, how can I play this role of mother? But also the husband has the same feeling that I could not protect my wife. And for children to see this kind of things on their parents, who are their own hero, it's just dramatical. And the consequence is that the fabric of the society is completely destroyed. So everyone loses his own identity in the community. And the last thing is the economical consequence of rape. And we can see that in most settings, the economy is completely destroyed. So I think that women are playing a big role in the community, and use rape as a weapon of war is really to destroy all capacity of the community, not only to destroy their identity, but also to destroy the social cohesion. And there I think that the population don't have capacity to organize themselves. Now we are working in many settings around the world, and we can see that this weapon is used everywhere in all conflict, because it's very effective, it's destroying and destroy all the capacity of the society to rebuild their own society.
You know, Doctor, that was such a powerful description of why rape is a tool of war, because unlike just killing your adversary and then counting the bodies that you have caused people to die, you are destroying community, and you're destroying the future of the community. You're destroying the potential for resilience of that community. You may be destroying the opportunity for replenishing that community because of, as you said, damages done to fertility. And you're also underscoring a very tragic but important point, is that rape has become an even more common tactic of war. There's no doubt that, you know, Russia and Ukraine, from the very first days of the invasion, used rape as a way to demoralize and undermine the population. So this is an incredibly important point, and we have to make sure that we don't let people overlook the damage that is done. Terry Reinke is a member of the European Parliament, co-president of the Greens EFA parliamentary group. You are on the front lines of fighting democratic backsliding, the anti-rights movements that Neil was describing, and that are increasingly coordinated across borders. And it's not just among European countries, because a lot of the financial support for these movements comes from the United States. There's a clear, money trail across the Atlantic. What are you seeing, Terry, in terms of the tactics that these anti-rights forces are using to gain ground? And what is the most effective form of resistance? How do we fight the pushback?
Thank you very much. First of all, I really want to say this. A lot of you have also hinted towards it, but I really want to say it. It is obviously about women, and it is about trans people, and it is about different minorities. But at the core of it is a power question. And this is really authoritarianism against democracy, what we are seeing. And there are different axes where this battle is being fought at the moment. I would say in Europe, migration is one of those battles where we have a very and really increasingly toxic debate. Climate as a green is one of those battles where now we see that the same mechanisms are being used in order to go against climate action. And the third one is gender, and has been gender now for a long time. And let me say this first, because Neil was talking about how in Europe this has already been going on for a while and how it increased. I have to say, and I think we have to be critical to ourselves, for a very long time we underestimated this movement. And we underestimated exactly what you were saying, Madam Secretary, that they are very well networked and they're very well organized across borders. As a German, we thought, you know, these people, they're nationalist, they're not going to work together with people across Europe or with people in the US, but they did, and they did it very, very effectively. And I think we reacted too late, but now, and this has been going on for a while now, I think we do understand what is happening, also because of the great work of different civil society organizations, and we are indeed fighting back. And I think the question of resistance also has to be at the core of what we want to do, and I want to give you two examples. The first one is relating to the Istanbul Convention that you just mentioned, and all of you who don't know the Istanbul Convention, it is a fantastic convention by the Council of Europe in the fight against gender-based violence. It is really, I think, a groundbreaking convention in that sense, and it has been ratified by a number of EU member states, but indeed, because of this backlash and because anti-rights movement were going against the Istanbul Convention, by the way, largely due to attacks against trans people and conspiracy theories about trans people, we had member states who had signed the Istanbul Convention who then did not ratify it, and with Turkey we even had one country that had ratified that then withdrew from the Istanbul Convention. So what did we do in the European Parliament when the situation was so difficult? Basically we said, okay, if not all EU member states are ratifying the Istanbul Convention, why doesn't the European Union ratify the Istanbul Convention? And this might seem like a very easy thing to do, but it was a legally challenging process. But in the European Parliament, and there I must really shout out to a lot of my mostly female, but I think not exclusively female, colleagues from all different political parties, that we made this possible. We pushed for the European Union to ratify the Istanbul Convention, and with this set a very, very clear sign that the European Union as a whole not only stands behind the Istanbul Convention, but stands behind a system of international law that protects human rights. And this is at stake right now. And I would be happy to say it's only Vladimir Putin who is attacking it, but if we look at the US administration and what they have been doing, how many different treaties the US has now withdrawn from, we have a problem in this also coming from the US. So it is even more important that Europe and that other countries across the world stabilize the system, and we did it with regards to the Istanbul Convention. The second example I want to give, and there again I unfortunately have to look at the US, when the Supreme Court overruled the Roe versus Wade verdict, of course, this sent shockwaves across the world, because the question of the right to choose was and is, I think we are all aware of this, is put in this position. And I have to give a big shout out to her, because she was my girlfriend at the time, Mélanie Vogel, a French senator, and a lot of women lawmakers in France took this as a starting point for creating a process of putting the right to abortion into the French constitution. And it was an uphill battle, I can tell you, because I was very close to following it, but they managed. And now the right to abortion is part of the French constitution. And I think this is a fantastic way of how we can not only rely on what we have achieved in the past, but actually codify and stabilize these rights in constitutions. We as a European Parliament call for the same thing, to have the right to abortion being inserted into the Charter on Fundamental Rights of the European Union, which would be a fantastic step to do exactly this. But why am I saying this? I think sometimes when we look at the world, I feel this way, it's so grim and it is so overwhelming, and there are so many bad things that are happening, and I don't want to relativate this. But when we work together, we can also fight back. And I think that these kind of examples are really the light that we all have to see sometimes in order to fight back and to win back these battles, because I still fundamentally believe that we can win this and that we will win this.
Mm. Well, thanks for that upbeat comment. And I think it's also really important to underscore that the right is much better organized. The anti-rights, I should say, the anti-rights movement is much better organized, certainly much better funded. And there isn't enough coordination and conversation between the U.S., Canada, Europe, other like-minded places, countries, to see what can be done to try to respond. Is it time for us to go to the audience? Okay, well, we will go to the audience. So does anyone have questions for any of our panelists? Lots of questions. I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 right there, and then anybody back there, I'll turn and...
Thank you so much. My name is Sevgil Musayeva, chief editor of Ukrainska Pravda. So my first question to Dr. Mukwege. We also face with sexual violence as a part of war strategy in Ukraine. So and my question is how we can prevent our society from future intergenerational trauma, what should be done, and to Hillary Clinton, we also honor every year 100 women leaders of Ukraine, and can I ask you maybe to address them virtually during the ceremony, because for them it will be the huge support if it's possible. Yeah, thank you.
Dennis, do you want to respond?
Thank you. I think I want to thank the government of Ukraine because it's the first government in the world to start the program of reparation before the end of the war. And talking about what we are doing, we have good cooperation with the government of Ukraine to just support what we call holistic model. And this holistic model is a way to take care of women after to go these terrible things. And this can't wait until the end of the war. This can be very late. We can see the victim of the Second World War. I saw them. And after 70 years, they still get the stigma of what happened to them. And I think that what Ukraine is doing now is really very good, to start reparation before the end of the war. And I think that the consequence on the population will be very less. But other things, I want really to say, now it's time, maybe, we can see that the military spending is increasing everywhere. But when you ask, where is the budget to prevent? Because most of them are saying that we are spending our budget to protect our population. But when we accept that rape is a weapon of war, in this budget, we don't, for many countries, there is not a budget to prevent the consequence of rape during the conflict. And I think that if this budget is not, we can't make this budget now, when the war will, it will be late to do something. So I think that Ukraine is really an example, not only to treat women in a holistic way, medically, psychologically, to support them, so to reintegrate them in the society, and to support also legally, to collect all the evidence during the war. This is very important because after you can't go in justice and make reparation. So I think that, thank you so much for what you are doing. And really you are an example. Many countries should take example on you, what you are doing.
I did not know that. That's a great step forward to deal with the consequences of rape during the war. Destigmatize it, support women, support their families. Don't let the community effects be as severe. Yes, yes. Here comes the mic.
Brankica Jankovic, human rights expert from Serbia. Maybe more comment than a question, but for Madame Norwoev. But for those of you who face anti-gender narratives, you are lucky because it's a clear situation. We have to fight against that. But what we face in my country and maybe broader in the region, it's something we call pro-gender narrative led by conservatives and right parties, which misused narrative and to promote and to pretend that, look at us, we have quota, we have 40%, 50%, but what happened? Women embrace patriarchy as values, as cultures, and they justify all their wrongdoings. So I fully agree with you, Madame Noroev, that you emphasize critical role of culture, because we all have laws, better or less better. This is what happened with the Istanbul Convention. But nobody reads law in order to behave in the daily contacts. People behave according to their values, cultures. How to include more culture, what we should do in order to create a different landscape. This is what I think, this is what we need. Not legal framework is okay, but I think we need something more.
Just to say, I agree with you. I do think that a lot of sexism is culturally driven. It's not that there's a law that says women should be second-class citizens or women are not allowed to sit on the bus or what. But the fact is, when you start looking at who's at the table or who has power or who gets included or how people are treated, there's a lot of that's driven by culture. I think we also have to address some of the knock-on effects that are coming from the far-right movement in terms of young men and their attitudes to women, because some very odd unintended consequences that are appearing in young men that I think need to be addressed, who are feeling disempowered, who are feeling it's a win-lose situation, that women have come and taken their place, who have very deep misogyny embedded in their messaging. And it's connected then with a lot of online perceptions of women. There's a lot of online abuse that's directed from these perceptions that come from that. So I do think that, again, that's a new culture that's emerging in the next generation.
Can I just build off of that? Because that goes directly back to what I was talking before about the scarcity environment where young men are increasingly feeling hopeless for their future. And that crisis of hope, that crisis of belonging creates fertile ground for that scarcity, that competition for opportunity that is even fiercer and will only be fiercer with AI. Reducing jobs while increasing productivity and wealth among the few, that it's going to create even more fertile ground for the despondency and the hopelessness to be exploited by far right-wing politicians and movements who often will place the blame on women of all different kinds for taking those opportunities. And to your point, you cannot actually address this if we don't grapple with the role that social media is playing in both connecting far right-wing movements and voices, but then really normalizing rampant, horrific, violent homophobia, transphobia, racism, and sexism online. It has brought it back to the surface in a way that has given license to a generation of young people who are growing up online to use that kind of rhetoric and to adopt that worldview in their everyday lives. Young men today in the United States are far less likely now to agree with the sentiment that women deserve equal opportunity and women deserve to be paid the same as men than they have been in 30 years. It's at a 30-year low. And that is partly because it has been exploited through scarcity and fostered and normalized online.
Neil.
Thank you. Just wanted to react very briefly to our colleague from Serbia. Very important point, because I think we really need to understand that it's not men versus women and sexual minorities. When we take a look at some of the far-right populist parties in Europe now, several of them are led by women very successfully. A survey an investigation came out in France that pointed to the number of openly gay members of parliament in the French National Assembly. The political party with the largest number was the far right. It was not the left, not the Greens or the Socialists, the far right. So, yeah. Yeah. But so we need to understand things are not as clear-cut as we think. And just as a way to understand it, I'd like to maybe refer to a pop culture reference, The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, I'm sure many of us have seen this. Okay, when you take a look at who was the day-to-day abuser of June, the handmaid, it was the colonel's wife. It was not the men. It was other women. And I think we need to understand that women have their place within oppressive patriarchal systems. And then on the point of young men, I think we need to see that also there's something horrible happening there. They're part of this manosphere, but as well as being agents within this, they are targets and victims of this. Yes. This information is specifically targeting them and formatting their young brains when they're not old enough or mature enough to understand what is happening and bringing them down a very dark pathway. It radicalizes them, and then it also makes them prone to all sorts of grifts and scams that can lead to, in fact, self-harm. So I think we need to understand that they are agents of this problematic point of view, but they are also targets and victims of it.
Absolutely.
Really good points. Yes.
Thank you so much for bringing this topic to the conference. It has been a great conversation. My name is Mayra Martini. I'm the CEO of Transparency International. And as a global civil society organization with presence in more than 100 countries, we're very concerned about another trend that is also cross-border, that is the shrinking space for civil society to operate. It's not very far. The European Parliament has investigation inquiry open at the moment, looking at funding for civil society. We have rules restricting the ability of civil society to operate in many countries, and it has increased dramatically in the last year. And of course, the decision of the US of moving away from development aid also going to have an impact, is having an impact of civil society organization across the world. So my question is, how will this impact the ability of society to fight back and push back on the backlash? Because I think civil society organizations have been quite important. So I wanted to hear your views and what it is that we can do to stop this other trend that is quite problematic. Thank you.
Carrie.
I completely agree, and I very much agree with your analysis that also the successes that we have had where we actually managed to push back, they were only possible because of a very big engagement of civil society organization. And I would not only say gender is the only field, in a lot of other respects as well. So this is exactly why they are attacking civil society organizations, because they are a nuisance. They are standing up for fundamental rights. They are standing up for rule of law. They are standing up for democracy. So they have to go away. And you can see that in the playbook of authoritarianism. They go for media. They go for civil society organizations. Then they go for minority groups that are easily caricatured. And then they take away fundamental rights of everyone. So this is the playbook that we are seeing. And you are right, in the European Parliament, we are seeing it. And I must say, in the European Parliament, it is unfortunately not only the far right. It is also center-right and conservative parties that are following down this path right now. And I think, and I come from Germany, you know, it's not that the Nazis in 1933 had more than 50% of the votes. It were also democratic parties from the center-right who gave the power to the far right. And I think this is a critical moment where we also have to really push the conservatives and some liberal forces not to go into governments with far-right parties, not to follow this playbook, but to stand up in the center for democracy and to defend one of, I would say, the essence of democracy, and that is a lively and loud civil society. So my full support for the civil society organizations that are under attack right now. We, as the other democratic groups, we are in the European Parliament fighting back. But yes, it is an uphill battle, and I think it's going to be a battle that will continue over the next years and will also really define how successful we will be in fighting back against the backlash.
Anybody back here who has a question? Okay.
I will just add on the USAID very briefly. It was intentional. There's a reason why they went after USAID first. The first part of it was because they knew that public support for foreign aid was very low. After decades of actually center-right members of the Republican Party demonizing foreign aid as a waste, they knew that they could undermine USAID as the first agency in the federal government that they could decimate in order to, in some cases down the road, privatize efforts. right? They used USAID as a precedent that they are now trying to use with the Department of Education, the agencies within the Department of Health and Human Services. The list goes on. So that was the first reason. But the second reason was precisely your comment, that they knew they could decimate the international structures in place to protect women, to protect religious minorities, to protect LGBTQ people. And so it was two birds with one stone, or as I heard the other day, two flies with one swatter here. I guess it's a European idiom that I had not heard. And in addition to the USAID decimation, I was just having a conversation today about, on top of that, the change in the global gag rule from the United States. I was just talking with someone that some of the changes as it relates to reproductive health care is making them question whether they can even provide services to refugees who have been raped, healthcare services to refugees who have been raped. Of course, for LGBTQ people, trans people in particular, it raises questions whether these NGOs, these civil society organizations, can provide supports to trans people who are facing not just legal discrimination, outright violent oppression by their governments. And so there is a reason this was at the start. It laid the foundation for the decimation of the rest of the private government in order to privatize it, but also to undermine what little insufficient infrastructure we had in place to promote democracy and human rights globally.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman? Great, thank you.
My name is Khalil Bird, KB. I'm a board member of an organization called With Honor in the United States. We elect principled veterans to Congress, and thank you both for everything you've done. For the two of you, I want to talk about the financial networks, and if you could sort of double click on that a little bit more and talk about who's in the best position to break those networks up, and how would that be done?
Yeah, excellent question. What we found in terms of the financial networks, if I take a look at the nearly 1.2 billion that has been circulating in Europe for the past 5 years, 3 points of origin. United States, about 11-12%, Russian Federation, 25%, the rest comes from Europe itself. So even if we take out the foreign component, Europe is funding its own anti-gender, anti-rights movement. And this number has grown over the past 5 years. So we need to understand that. From the US, well, first from Russia, we've largely dealt with that. Okay. As a result of the sanctions, the Russian money stays within Russia and Belarus and maybe Serbia, but it stays there. The thing we need to consider is, as these discussions on Ukraine move forward, one of the things that both Presidents Trump and President Putin seem to really want is some lifting of the sanctions. Should that happen, this could potentially unleash billions of Russian rubles onto the world and fuel anti-democratic movements. So I think that's a corollary that needs to be considered in the discussions around any Ukraine deal that would come up. When it concerns Europe as such, one of the biggest challenges that we have is lack of transparency. You have different little national rules, and we're here in Germany. Germany is the worst. It is a black hole of financial transparency. We get better information from the Russian Federation. We need to learn Russian, figure things out, but we don't have information from Germany. When we have flows of funding, which they're not illegal, but they are what some are calling undesirable, and they alter our democracies, we need to have a way of counting that, or at least of being able to be aware of this. So, and we don't have that system. And I think I go back to what Terry was saying. For a long time, we underestimated this. We thought it was simply our local religious conservatives who have always been like this. They'll always be like that, and that's part of democracy. We have completely underestimated how they have really weaponized this social conservatism towards political and economic means. And now we're only now getting to it, so that we're having this discussion now.
Wow, this was a great discussion, and I think you can tell it could keep going because not only is there a lot to learn, but there's a lot to figure out what to do to try to push back against the pushback and create more alliances between and among elected officials, philanthropies, groups that are on the front lines of trying to provide services and deal with the impact of what is actually happening to people because of these changes. Last word, just very quickly, I want to just hear one last word from each of our panelists. Like, if you could suggest to this group any one thing that we should all be doing. Sarah, let's start with you.
Well, I think right now, as we are here, and as we are facing this global struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, we know that things are going to have to change. We know we are in a new chapter, but we have to preserve, while reforming, the global institutions that have helped to protect freedom and democracy. We have to protect NATO. We have to protect the United Nations. We have to protect the Transatlantic Alliance. We've got to restore international aid from the U.S. government to help rebuild some of these NGOs that have been decimated. We have to recommit to building the infrastructure so that we guarantee that we don't find ourselves in this situation again, so that we don't underestimate the challenges that we face and how precious our progress actually is.
Vinay?
So I would say this is a moment that calls on all of us to demonstrate moral clarity in standing up for the right thing right now, and that is the fundamental shared humanity that all of us have to uphold the rights of each and every person on this planet. And it's also a moment that calls for us to stand up with courage, wherever we sit, whatever our work is, because if we don't stand up, we will find that we will lose these rights. Rights are not just given. They are always fought for, and this is a moment we're being called on to fight for them.
Dennis?
The transgression of the human rights, and especially the rights of women, is due to the impunity that are enjoying the perpetrator and investigator. And I think it's really time to stand up, to speak up, that the rule must be respected. And if we don't really follow the rule of law, we don't support the rule of law, we can't really stop this movement. And for me, it's really very important to fight against impunity.
I can only follow what you have been saying, but I want to say something very practical. I very much agree that we have to stand up for our rights and democracy right now. But to be very practical, sometimes we have to do that in a small scale. And I want all of you to check out the great initiative, My Voice, My Choice. It's a fantastic feminist initiative in the European Union that is fighting for the right to choose, and that has gathered more than 1 million signatures all across Europe.
Which we support.
Yes, great. They're fantastic, and they really started it from scratch. And I think they're an inspiration because, as I said before, sometimes in these times, I know we are all overwhelmed. We all have very busy schedules, and the world looks so dark. I think the most important thing that we have to keep is to see that there is hope and to have faith in that there will be a better world still possible, even if we are facing this great backlash right now. So this, for me, in the very practical sense, look at these initiatives. It's not only My Voice, My Choice, but them specifically. See how much energy they have, and then never lose the faith that we can win back and that we can make this world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Last word, Neil.
Thank you. Maybe just some very final parting thoughts. I think first we need to understand what game is being played here. Okay, we're not talking just about women's rights or the rights of sexual minorities. That is being used as an entry point to undermine those rights, human rights, and liberal democracy itself. So I think we need to have a certain clarity about what is happening here and then play at that level. Thank you.
All right, you have your marching orders, everybody.
What's your advice? What's your advice for us?
Yeah. Thank you all.
Wrap it up sign.